In this lecture, we will take a look at the basics of the World Schools Debating Championship debate format. Short abbreviation is WSDC debate format. We will explain what a debate format is, what is the WSDC version, why do we use it, why is it perhaps useful for you to know it as well. So what is a debate format? Debate is, at least in the context of the classroom, a formalized exchange of information. That means that we precisely determine who will speak when, for what duration, and also in the terms of form, what is going to be the content of their speech. Why do we do this? We do this because this is how we ensure a systematic and orderly examination of both sides and their arguments. However, the rules that we apply are arbitrary. There are several different parameters that you have got, and you can change those depending on your situation and what is happening. And we call a specific rule set, we call a format. And one of the most popular debate formats in secondary education is the WSDC format, so World Schools Debating Championship format. It's a format that is used at the international tournament. The World Schools Debating Championship is sort of a World Cup where countries compete, not schools. Each country sends a team, and the more and basically everything about the format now follows in the lecture. So yeah, the World Schools Debating Championship happens every year. It's an annual competition for national teams. Every year, roughly 70 countries attend. And because it is, such a worldwide event, it is kind of the default debate format for high school debaters in most countries that know and use debate, including the European Union. So basically, most online resources are specifically geared towards WSDC. Most experts that you're going to find, and also other mentors who do with debate, are going to use this rule set. And also because it's so widely used, it's one of the most accessible debate formats. So basically, even though you might not use it precisely, even though you might adapt it, it is quite important that you know at least of it, but maybe also that you actually use it wherever possible, just because it's a true and tested format. It's been used now for more than 30 years. So yeah, there's several good reasons for choosing it and picking it. Now, let's first start with the basics, and then we're going to go through the format speech by speech. First, each team has 3 to 5 members, and they all prepare together. However, only 3 speakers are actually included in the debate. Now, you can have a team of 3 members only. You don't need 5. 3 is perfectly enough. The reason you have 5 is that for big tournaments like the WSDC, you will have more than 3 speakers, just so that if one of them, becomes ill, or basically that you have reserves and substitutes. So that's the reason why 5. But yeah, only 3 speakers can actually speak. All speakers have different roles. So in terms of form, there's different things they should be doing in their speech. Each team has 3 constructive speeches that are 8 minutes long. And each team also gets 1 reply speech, and that is 4 minutes long. Every debate has a thesis. It's called a motion. One team is in favor of that thesis. That team is called the proposition, or sometimes government. And the other team is against, and it's usually called opposition or sometimes negation. One thing that is also important is that during all speeches except reply speeches, the opposing team members, so the members of the team that is currently not speaking can give or actually offer points of information. That can be either a question or it can be a comment. They cannot offer them during the first and last minute of the speech, so that the intro and conclusion are sort of protected, but they can otherwise offer them freely. That means that you stand up and you say point, and you signal with your hand that you're offering it. However, the speaker does not need to accept, right? They can just say, for instance, they can wave down, they say no thank you, I will take you later, or something like that. However, the speaker should accept a point at least 2 times during the speech. And points, by the way, have to be quite short, right? 15 seconds. So it's not like a 1 minute long production. No, really short, either question, either comment. Okay, this is the basic structure of the format. First proposition speaker, then first opposition, second proposition, second opposition, third proposition, third opposition, but then for the reply speeches, the final 2 speeches, opposition goes first. Why, you might ask? The idea was, when the format was being created, that opposition always has the last word, so you kind of balance that you give proposition a sort of the last word with the reply speeches. But again, this is arbitrary. It could have been otherwise. It's I guess there's no bigger logic behind it, at least not that I would be aware of. Now we are going to go through all the speeches, speech by speech, and we're going to briefly mention what should be happening in each speech, in terms of form and, as we say, role fulfillment. Okay, let's start with the first proposition speech. The first proposition speaker should, 1, frame the debate. That means that they provide relevant definitions, that they set a context, that they explain the problem, and that if needed, they present a model. This is important because debates are different based on what are we debating about. For instance, if we say this house believes in existence of evil, there is no model necessary. However, if you say this house would introduce civil conscription, suddenly you require some model to explain how civil conscription would work. So basically, if your debate is something abstract about values, about what we believe, then you don't need to explain a model. If, however, you're arguing about a concrete action that should happen in real life, you have to explain, probably at least to an extent, how that would work, because otherwise we do not have the necessary context for the debate. Here, you should be guided by common sense. What do we need to say? What do we need to establish before the debate can become clear? And what do we need to define, basically? But not only in terms of context, but also other parameters. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that the first proposition speaker should already present most of the arguments for their side. The number here is not prescribed, but usually they present 2 arguments. The reason for that is that given that you have 8 minutes, You usually have enough time for two arguments, uh, not more, but usually it's better to have, to have two ideas that you're explaining, than one idea that you would be explaining for a longer time. So this is also dependent, heavily dependent on the situation. So nothing is prescribed, but usually two arguments are given here. The first opposition speaker has a pretty symmetrical role. First, they provide rebuttal or negation to proposition one. Note, this negation is obviously against arguments, however, also potentially about the definitions. We call this a definitional challenge. If the proposition would set a debate unfairly, if they would violate the laws of reason and common sense or sensibility, first opposition speaker can object to that. However, only the first opposition speaker, so second or third cannot, because after the first speeches, the debate is sort of set, and if you do not object to the definitions immediately, you cannot object later. After that, so after negation and potentially the discussion of definition, the first opposition speaker presents most of their arguments. Again, usually two, sometimes one, depends on the situation. The second proposition speaker, one, is rebuilding proposition's case. That means answering the negation of first opposition speaker. They're providing negation. And yeah, here, so they're criticizing the other team's case. Here, this takes a lot of time, because if you want to properly criticize an argument, you need more than just a few sentences, right? Except if the argument is really obviously problematic, but this isn't usually the case. And the final thing that they do is they present the rest of their case. They present the final part of proposition case. Again, the number here is not prescribed. This can be multiple arguments. However, usually what they do is they only present one, right? And the reason why is that they can only have enough time for one. Okay, if you go to the second opposition speech, again, the role is very symmetrical. The second opposition speaker should, one, rebuild the opposition's case. That means mitigating the consequences of prop's negation. They should be providing negations themselves. And again, the same applies, like not just a few sentences, but rather more. And finally, they're presenting the last parts of opposition's case, usually one argument, but again, nothing is set in stone. As many as you can possibly explain. If you explain them well, should be fine. Now let's go to the third speech. Third speakers should not bring new arguments into the debate. Just because it's very late, it's impossible to thoroughly examine them. And what they should be doing mostly is they should be responding to the opposition's case. And this can be done either by presenting clashes. What are clashes? A clash is if you have a debate and you boil it down to 2 or 3 specific disagreements, that's a clash. So for instance, if you debate about the government doing something, you can say, the consequences are economical, social, and security-wise. Okay, you can analyze the whole debate, respond to the opposition's case by focusing on those 3 clashes. For instance, you can answer questions. So for instance, you can, set the debate in some way. The speaker can decide to set it as a collection of questions, and then they can analyze the debate via answering those questions. They can also even do a chronological analysis of what happened when, and respond to arguments that way. They are quite free. They can do pretty much whatever, as long as they are winning the debate, as we say. That means that this is a bit tricky, also perhaps a bit tricky to teach, because it's hard to explain to students. However, experience can give you good ideas on what works and what does not work. However, presenting clashes is probably the most common one. The very same holds true to the third opposition speech. There should not be new arguments in that speech. There should be analysis of the whole opposition case, or the whole case of their opponents, either presenting clashes, either answering questions, either doing chronological analysis, or anything else. Now, then we have the opposition reply speech. Here, one extra rule has to be mentioned. Only the first or the second speaker of the team can deliver the reply, because you're not allowed to have back-to-back speeches. So you cannot have, for instance, third and reply speech. Also, in the case that only two people are speaking, because maybe someone has gotten ill or something, you can have, we call that you're iron personing something. That you can have two people debating, that's fine, but they cannot do back-to-back speeches. So that means one debater does first and third, and the other does second and reply. So what is a reply? A reply is sort of a summary of the debate, a sort of way to sum up what happened, but obviously in a way where you explain why your team should be winning that. Basically, it's an analysis of the debate that happened. It's sort of a meta debate. And as we said before, points of information cannot be offered during the reply speeches. The same goes for proposition, with one difference. If opposition in the third speech or the reply speech brought on new arguments, you cannot, and that's very rare, but you cannot answer them obviously before, right? Because they came so late. So you have the right to make a response, even though generally you should be just having, a summary of the debate, because this is the important part. The reply speech should not be about arguments specifically, should not be about new examples, or at least not providing concrete analysis or anything like that. Reply speeches should mostly be about summary of the debate that happened. And this is here the exception. So proposition can have a short refutation if something really new came on in the opposition side. And now you know the WSDC format, and you can use it or understand other materials you find online. And once again, thank you.